Uh, 5 minutes after 2 on February 15th, 2024. I want to welcome everybody to this regularly called workshop for the Temple City Council. We will just dive right in. The public commenters. All right. Moving on to the work session agenda, we'll discuss if we need any regular meeting agenda items for the meeting posted for today. Council or staff? Yes, ma'am.
I do. Susan and I would like to visit with Brian, if we could, about regular agenda item number 6. I know Brian has some updated information and some questions about some information we got from TISD and their response.
Okay.
To this.
All right.
I say ditto.
All right. Very good.
I was on the, when we could, Kelly, could you perhaps pull up the number 6 in regular agenda? We got slides that we can address. So you all will recall that this is the one on West Nugent that was tabled to be able to, at first reading, to be able to address concerns about potential multifamily. It's 3426 West Nugent, kind of cat a corner from Kennedy Powell Elementary School, the south side of Nugent, and just to the south of the Meta site that, of course, is being developed currently. And so, that's just a concept plan. This is essentially what the presentation or the update that I'll give at the regular agenda. So this is just a combination of a couple of the uses that they're looking at: multifamily, warehouse, office, that are both allowed by right in office 2. Of course, the recommendation is to add a plan development so that we could also go back, look at multifamily, so that any multi-story multifamily, which is, if they build that, then it's going to be multi-story. They would cap it at 3 stories, but certainly with any existing residential, primarily around here, you have some manufactured housing here and some larger single-family detached housing there. And so the direction was to look at minimizing the impact on any future multifamily, looking into the backyards of those existing residential. So we've done that, but since then, TISD, of course, we notify TISD for all of our zoning cases, and we will typically hear from them before first reading, but that doesn't close the door to hear from them between readings. And so they are opposed to the plan. And so most of their concerns are related to traffic, understandably so. We've got the elementary across Nugent, and it is probably, Dr. Ott didn't say this, but I have a son that used to go to Kennedy Powell, and that it is probably their fastest growing elementary school. So their demographics suggest a couple hundred new students, with future development in the area within those boundaries, within whatever that specified period of time. But so understandably, they're concerned about traffic really across from one of their flagship elementary schools. So what I wanted to update you on, Jason, of course, our senior transportation planner, and Cheryl, the case manager for this project, we want to take a look at least the concept plan that I showed you, and really look at traffic, because TISD prefers that is single family, not the multifamily, not the office warehouse. One piece of information that Cheryl, has discussed with Dr. Ott and Kent Boyd, assistant superintendent, is that the office warehouse, those are limited. These are smaller. It's not distribution center. This is not the Niagara facility going up behind Buc-ee's. These would be, typically 5,000, 10,000 square foot warehouses with, 500 square foot offices, electricians, plumbers, tradesmen. But, so we wanted to look at the traffic though. And so I think what is interesting when you look at single family, which PIST prefers at that location. So for 200 units, and you could fit on the 26 acres, 26 acres could accommodate single family 3. Given there are some easements, there are detention ponds, but I think it's still feasible to have 200 single family detached, traditional single family in that 26 acres. And so we're looking at, okay, if this were all single family versus partially multifamily, partially warehouse office, then that would generate 1,886 daily trips. So that's all, 9 point something trips per unit. Of course, multifamily, especially low rise, which 3 stories or lower are considered low rise, that's a lower number of trips generated. If you think about it, multifamily is going to be less likely to have families, and certainly families with teenagers. They're also more likely to have jobs that don't have the regular 9 to 5 schedule. So point is, it's a lower ratio. So 200 units for multifamily as opposed to single family would generate about 550 fewer trips. Of course, trips are from home, that's one trip, return home, that's another. So we look at that, and then you look at the warehousing. Warehousing is a very low traffic generator. And this warehousing definition, Jason confirmed, includes some office as well. So this is the appropriate traffic generating ratio to look at for 85,000 square feet of warehouse office would generate approximately 145 daily trips. So the point is, if you add the multifamily together with the warehousing, that is at probably worst case going to be about a similar traffic generating ratio as if all of it were developed as single family. So, but more than likely, it's actually going to generate less traffic. So that is something that I wanted to give you all an update on. The applicant has also agreed to cap the number of multifamily units at 250. So the plan they're showing here assumes 200. But once again, this is a concept plan. They don't have a buyer or, for future multifamily warehouse office as well, but they're willing to put a cap on the multifamily, which still would generate, 250 units would still generate fewer trips than the single family if it's all developed single family, and then of course that warehouse office at 85,000 square feet, could be the remainder. Could also just be office, because of course this is office 2, which is also a low traffic generator. So that's the update I wanted to give you to show the analysis that we as staff have done in the meantime since we found out about this. I think that was on Tuesday.
So just so I'm clear on its location, West Nugent's on the bottom.
Yes.
And that is the mobile home park.
Yes. So there are mobile homes currently, a few, a smaller one that is on the same property that would not be removed immediately. What our understanding is that the owner would work with them and even help them relocate. But yeah, there are a few here, but larger manufactured housing, so to further east.
So the entrance for the multifamily would be off of Nugent?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it connected all to the warehouses that I always called it Curly, but Searly?
So what they're showing here would provide connectivity between the two. And I'm sure they would probably want to, they're probably internal management to keep trucks from plowing through a multifamily neighborhood, but I'm not sure that we have not heard that from the developer. But as this concept does show connectivity between both sides, and I say both, they're showing potential office and limited retail on the Nugent frontage as well. Of course, that's allowed under Office 2. But either way, this concept is also contingent upon having the Kearley Road access as well, which means that a lot of that traffic could just go straight south and down to Airport.
So, my kids went to this elementary school and, on pickup and drop off.
Oh,
in the
yes.
morning on Hurley, it backs all the way up to the loop and
It does.
goes out to there, and it's 2 lanes.
Right. Thankfully, that's the other lane that, so that
Yeah.
any traffic coming here be southbound, waving at all the moms and dads.
For drop off,
waiting
but for pickup,
Yeah.
it would back up.
Yeah, for pickup.
So it
And,
could potentially be.
That's the
Could
road
be.
they closed for Meta, isn't it?
but even,
Are they still gonna back that?
Because
Brian,
that Meta is right behind this.
Right.
And it dead ends halfway.
Okay.
Brian, just to be clear, the applicant is the developer or the applicant is looking for a developer if this goes through?
the applicant and owner is a developer. Don't know whether he is going to develop it. I think it's possible. He could sell it. And so,
And he would sell it with these attachments, so to speak,
couldn't speak to that.
if he were to sell it.
And I don't know if they're on the virtual platform for the workshop. I know that he and his engineer are going to be at the regular meeting. So those will be questions.
And
Any sale would require them to comply
That's right.
with any conditions that are
Yes.
established here.
the multifamily down here that is non-affected, so to speak.
I'm sorry.
The rest of the mobile home park
Oh.
is not affected at this point.
I mean, at this point, so it's just one of those that at whatever time that is developed, at P and Z, the owner did indicate that he wanted to work with them for relocation. So whatever that happens to mean, but
I'm sorry, one more thing, Chief,
Yep.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
no, that's
but,
okay.
Our kids, it's okay that I put them on the spot? That's good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you put me on the spot all the
Yeah,
time.
no. When our kids were at school there, they said, they may have been exaggerating, but probably once a month there was a shooting at the mobile home park and everything would be shut down or locked down at the school. So with the multifamily capped at 250, how much activity do you normally see in an apartment of that size?
Well, it would be great if I had all the charts that people have studied for years that Brian has that says like this creates that many businesses. Don't.
Okay, that's fine. I realize it was kind of
I can do some
blue.
research.
It just feels like it would be a more secure development than the mobile home park.
Of course,
Is where I'm going with it.
it's somewhat depending on the income level of the housing. Was there any discussion with the owner of that direction?
In terms of
Type of,
what type of units?
yeah, what type
Market
of
rate?
units?
It's market rate.
Yeah, and they will be market rate. So yes,
Somebody, who said that?
Mayor.
Mayor Day.
Mayor did. We know that?
Yes, we do know they will be
Okay.
market rate. But, in terms of.
No, I understand.
Yeah, in discussions with other folks, I mean, I hope that the ISD also can appreciate that they built a school at the edge of the industrial park. And that's, it's hard to surround yourself with single family one when you're right on the edge.
Yes.
So I'm hopeful that they will be understanding.
Well, I will say too, I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's some ripple effects of Meta coming in, expanding the business park, and so, Meta, it was essential that they closed Kearley. Well, that was additional access that would serve this development and others on Nugent. And so this essentially, from a staff perspective, it's an appropriate zoning district and appropriate uses that are a good buffer from Meta and the rest of the industrial park. We've had lots of light industrial inquiries. You've probably heard from some upset brokers that staff's not being very supportive of light industrial there, but that is essentially the line that we and implement our comprehensive plan have drawn to say, okay, light industrial we can't support for all those various reasons, but office, warehouse, and multifamily do appear to be
Yeah.
good uses, good zoning district. And of course, they're not committed to these two uses, but that's just what in their market research thus far, that's what they're looking at. They could do all office.
You mean if
If
this
it's
failed and they
approved.
came back?
No, if this were approved for O2, I mean, that is, anything under right
Right.
now, unless it's specified in the PD. And so that PD does open up that opportunity to explore a little further to say, okay, are there any of these uses that under O2 that shouldn't be allowed? Are there any additional conditions that, may require a little bit more time to evaluate? But they've been super responsive and
Good.
accommodating in terms of looking at, capping the multifamily at 250, in terms of the original direction of looking at the impact of multi-story multifamily adjacent to the residential. They would, if it's multi-story, then they would provide a 40-foot buffer with appropriate landscaping to provide screening. And so that's part of the presentation as well, but I understand that that's kind of secondary right now with concerns by TSD.
Cheryl, have you or do you know if the developers had any discussions with TISD, with Kent or anybody?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think the developer was surprised when
Okay.
we sent the concerns.
I presume that, well, I certainly at this very moment, by 5 o'clock, I may feel differently, but right now I think I will ask the developer, assuming he or she is there, if they would be willing to have this delayed for 2 weeks and let them have a meeting with TISD and get some communication going, really a complete understanding of what TISD's problems or concerns are, not problems. Since we're not really 100%, I have to say, I have not spoken to anybody at TISD, and I believe Jessica also. My basic reaction was TISD is opposed to it. Okay, I am too. That's dumb on my part. I certainly admit that. But I would like to see a little bit more conversation if it doesn't put the developer in some huge bind.
How many acres for a home and ag do we have? Is it one or?
One, yeah, it's a minimum of an acre per residential lot.
If you fit it and take out streets, if they were to do this, by right, what they could do right now with any kind of homes, it'd be 20 or so probably.
Yeah,
What?
probably. I
20
guess,
years.
well, and I guess technically it would all be private. It probably wouldn't require, I don't know, get into engineering territory, might not require detention. All the roads would be private. So they could probably just do 26 lots, and so then maybe they could get 25 just in terms of trying to figure out how to piece it together. But yeah, they could do something between 20 and 25, I would say. There's the
Are
use.
you thinking that? in some
No, I
way?
was just wondering
curious.
if because it's ag now, they just wanted to
Right, just for comparison.
keep it zoning and go.
Yeah. And something else to just consider, because development along Nugent is happening. Our comprehensive plan, certainly envisions growth there. And so Nugent is a minor arterial, but it's not built as a minor arterial. It's built more like a community collector with 3 lanes, and you've got sidewalk on one side, and then you've got gaps in the sidewalk. And so one thing to consider, whether it's for not necessarily for this development, but future development, is looking at a potential TCIP project for Nugent. Got 80 feet of right of way, so could easily widen Nugent, once again, venturing into engineering territories, like easily for me to draw a line, but widen the road, the four lanes, adding a sidewalk on the north side, filling in gaps on the south side. So, regardless of whether this development happens, it may be something that we want to take a look at.
Before or after this, or would this?
Well, just in regard, now, just to evaluate.
But if
for
this
future
went
development.
through, would that hinder well, as you just outlined it?
It wouldn't hinder them. I mean, they would just deal with construction just like everybody else does.
Thank you, Brian. I
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you
Yeah.
very much.
Very welcome.
Before we move on, just one concern that I have with this is, I mean, if one of the office, warehouse office tenants was coming off of Nugent, they're gonna drive through retail. They could drive through multifamily
Mhm.
also to get back to the office space. That does not seem like the wisest thing to do.
Well,
And vice versa. You don't
Yeah.
want people necessarily cutting through the office warehouse to come to multifamily.
sure. And
Is there
so
a way to separate that
there,
and get enough entrances for the required entrances?
there is, I mean, both the engineer and the owner, slash developer are very experienced in multifamily and non-residential development. Those are good questions for them. But ultimately, I think, one of the biggest questions is what kind of truck traffic are we talking about? And for the most part, I think we're talking vans, just utility vans
And little kids.
and not 18 wheelers. So.
No, I understand that, but children in the multifamily
Oh, sure.
with a van whipping through there, some guy getting off the
Yeah.
drive,
So there, yes, to
that seems silly.
your point, it's a low volume, but if you've got a low volume of vans that are, have a deadline for delivery or what have you, then, so that is. Good
I think it's
question.
practical to think too, that the multifamily is likely to be fenced. So your circulation would more likely be multifamily through office than it would be warehouse office through
Sure.
multifamily. And I think that your primary point of access to be up here.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
that. And I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem smart to have all three different uses connected like that.
Mhm.
Is there enough room in different spots to be able to have the entrances and the exits spaced far enough apart? Could you do on warehouse office up there, if you made everyone go toward Curly, would you need two entrances? Or I guess an entrance and an exit off of Curly? Then be able to isolate Curly, the warehouse office by itself away from multifamily?
No, I mean, I think based on that scale, a single entrance would be sufficient.
Yeah.
But the multifamily.
I don't know, that's the only thing that really getting me any worry.
The multifamily, so the multifamily.
Multifamily
At
required.
this point, multifamily would need two improved entrances. So they're showing two. So because of the number of units, if they were to exceed 150, which they most certainly would, well, there's 200 or 250, then this additional access point is essential, but they could still, and probably would fence off their project and use fairly sparingly, but at least it's at a minimum an emergency access point for them, but they would probably still have that as an option.
And there's no way to do another one onto West Nugent, obviously.
No, there just is
Unless they,
not enough
unless they
space.
did multifamily on the
Yeah.
west side and had the two entrances and
access.
Yeah, but then
warehouse and
it's
stuff
back,
down here.
but then it's backing up to Meta,
To me, it's necessary.
which is
No,
less
that's not-
desirable for
Yeah, that's not
multifamily.
desirable. That'd be the only way to have The
Right.
multifamily, the two entrances, they required without one of them coming out to Curly over there.
Am I the only one that really bothers?
I don't
I mean,
like
if so, I'll move on.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but at this point, what's your recommendation? Ask them to,
I don't, it just doesn't seem smart to connect both of those properties. And then you've got, you got problems, like David said, if they fenced it, but the multifamily folks will still have access, now you're talking about an access code or, or something. Does it impact emergency personnel getting in and out of there with another gate?
They have a radio frequency, get a
Click to enter.
click to enter.
Most likely what you would see is a limited access back towards Curly. So you would have a gate there that would be an emergency access only, more than likely, and your access in and out of multifamily is going to be to Nugent. And then,
Would the multifamily people be able to open that gate or would it be simply for emergency vehicles with radio frequency?
it would depend. If I were trying to lay this out, I would say just make it an emergency vehicle access point. And
Do you need two emergency vehicle access points?
that's what drives the
That
requirement.
design like it is now?
It's emergency vehicles.
And have that one is just emergency.
Okay. I hadn't thought through it all the way with, emergency access and gates and things. It just, I don't know. Little kids and work vans don't mix well. But as long as you're able to keep them separate. All right.
Think about trash pickup too.
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. And then what, would you have to have some kind of, school crossing or something?
Most likely, I mean, I think, and that's something to, I guess regardless of whether this development happens, if future residential happens there, then, certainly that's a larger residential development along that section of the north side of Nugent, and there are options for grant projects for pedestrian islands. Jason, our resident TxDOT whisperer, could have a grant ready pretty quickly, but yeah, I mean, certainly there would be other, other needs and opportunities there.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Tim on this. I don't mind the warehouse so much that makes more sense as kind of a buffer to the light industrial market.
Sure.
The multifamily just seems like they're trying to squeeze a square peg in a
Yeah.
round hole kind of thing.
Well, that's a great point, and maybe they would be just fine with that,
With which?
with warehouse office.
All warehouse office.
I mean, so that is a low traffic generator.
Multifamily.
Is there a zoning for that or it'd be a PD?
I mean, no, O2 allows it.
So we'd have to have a PD if we just wanted.
Oh, yes, if it's correct. If that would be a condition to limit, to essentially eliminate multifamily, so.
I go back to thinking more conversation between developer and TISD might be useful.
Sure,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I hate to
makes sense.
make a mountain out of a molehill.
No, it's, clearly they have concerns, legitimate concerns. And regardless of when they bring them up, they're, until the development happens, they can be addressed.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, we haven't made a decision on what to do with it yet, but could someone at least give the developer a heads up?
Mhm.
Instead of, hollering across the council chambers, hey, would you mind?
yeah.
I mean, if somebody at least give them a heads up.
We speak nicely.
Well, and I tell you what, Kelly is, do we have a Bruce Griffin or a Don Poole or both on the workshop? So either way,
Either one of those.
okay, so we will absolutely let them know.
Okay. All right, council, anything else on this? Staff, anything?
Thank you. I appreciate the
Thank you,
time.
Chandler.
Yes, thank you, Brian, and Cheryl. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm certainly more convoluted than before we had to come from.
That was helpful. Good. Counselor staff, anything else on the agenda? Nothing, everybody good?
I just want to note, we do have the Bird Creek community plan and item number 5. We brought that to you all in December. And there were some concerns with the reduction of Bird Creek Hill. So we have revised that to remove that recommendation. And so that is.
Bird Creek Hill, I don't know.
Yes, I call it
Took me a second to feel like what you're talking about.
I do have exhibits if y'all are
Sorry,
interested.
they
in
flattened
taking
and
it, but
renewed.
you have it.
We did read that.
You get
Yes,
somebody.
I did an interview.
All right, very good. Moving on to item 2 is to receive an update from the project team and to discuss the revisions to the Unified Development Code. Mr. Chandler.
All right, I'm going to defer to one of the project managers,
Good.
Jason Deckman.
Yes.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to give a quick introduction for our consultant team who are going to give the presentation online. So some of y'all may know, you met with them before last summer when we did the kickoff for this project. So White and Smith Law Firm, they're the consultant that are helping us go through this process. Mark White, one of the founders. The company was founded in 2005. Mark has about 32 years of experience in planning law, municipal land use, working on plans just like this. He's based out of Kansas City. He's joined with us today by Justin Wallace, so Mark is the lawyer. Justin is the planner. He's got a background in urban design and architecture. He's been with the firm since 2021. He's got about 10 years of experience with planning. So we've got, I think, both sides covered, both the legal side and the code side. A lot of expertise with the consultant team and many more that are not on the call today. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mark, who you can see on the screen.
Jason, sir, if I could maybe offer a comment too. Sorry to interrupt you, Mark. As you go through this presentation, I had specifically asked Jason and team and Cheryl to bring this forward. I want to make sure that what we're hearing from council are things that, sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in technicalities when you get into a code update like this. So we're going to talk more broadly about things you like, things you don't like, things you want to keep the same, things you don't want to keep the same. So I would encourage you to please be as interactive as you can. You're going to see some questions and then some discussion points that go with those questions, but please don't feel limited to staying within those realms. If you see something, we're really looking to get the feedback so that as we start to review drafts as a staff, we know what direction council is feeling comfortable with.
Good, thank you. Can everybody hear me and see the screen? Great. I appreciate everybody's attention today. This is a very, very big, comprehensive, and important project for the city. And what I'm going to do today is give you a little update on where we are. And then I'm going to bring up some issues relating to housing, specifically in Temple, which is an important part of what the city faces over the next 20 years, given that you're very, very popular, you're growing fast, you're getting a lot of demand for new housing in the city. And that's something we want to make sure that we get right and get some early feedback from y'all on this proposal. So I'll give you a little bit of an update, talk a little bit about how land use controls and housing costs interface. Talk a little bit about some of the options that we're looking at in each of the zoning districts, our next steps. And I left some time in there for some open discussion, but y'all feel free to interrupt me as I go. If things pop into your head, you want to get something on the table, feel free to do so. So I will begin by talking about your comprehensive plan adopted in 2020 is really the blueprint for the project. Plans in Texas are not self-implementing. They're not law. We have to make sure our plans and your zoning regulations, your subdivision regulations, and so forth are in alignment with the plan. If you want to see the things described in your comprehensive plan policies happen. So we spent a lot of time reviewing the plan, and along with that, along with our initial public outreach, which we did last year, we identified, several major objectives here. One are to make sure the processes and procedures are as efficient as possible. We're looking at really targeting problem areas of the existing UDC. We want to fix things that are broken, add things that we need to make sure that we implement the plan, but we don't see this as just sort of a revolutionary rewrite of what you got. We just want to make sure we're only targeting problems that you're facing. We want to make sure that the UDC is as easy to use as possible for folks like y'all, planning commissioners, applicants, and so forth, that they can find the information they're looking for and understand it when they're reading it. We want to make sure that the development standards are effective for all parts of the city, including corridors, including infill sites and new development areas. We want to make sure that while we want the standards and criteria to be as predictable and easy to understand as possible, that we've built in options for flexibility as well. We need to make sure that the code's in compliance with state and federal law. A UDC is, unlike the comprehensive plan, is a legal document. I mean, it's your legal authority to impose standards on new development, to create permissions and so forth. So there's the state of Texas has pretty detailed zoning and subdivision enabling legislation we need to be mindful of. There's been a lot of litigation recently on things like short-term rentals that we need to be mindful of as we go forward. So that's a big part of what we review and analyze as we go forward. And we want to make sure, again, that we're in alignment with all of your major policy documents, your comprehensive plan, and other master plans that you have for specific issues in the city. So this is a five-phase project. We did the kickoff last year in early 2023. We've prepared an issues identification summary based on all the comments we got from stakeholders and staff, put together a codes assessment in December. We're now really in the, I know David mentioned, getting bogged down in details. We've been preparing our initial drafts for staff review, and we'll go through several of those. We're drafting in modules. So we're doing the zoning districts first, which are sort of the DNA for the rest of the code, then development standards, then processes, and et cetera. So there's a lot of homework and a lot of really rolling up your sleeves and writing while we do that. In summer, we'll have a 75% draft for public review. We'll have public workshops so that people can provide input. And then we hope to get this finalized in fall and ready for public hearings for adoption. And so this gives you a sense of the modules. The first module, as I mentioned, are zoning districts and use regulations. So a lot of the comments we got from staff and from stakeholders related to things like, particular types of use regulations. Short-term rentals tends to be the issue du jour anywhere I work. So that's one. And I know one of the council members brought up an issue about build to rent type communities, which are becoming a thing in the marketplace around the country. There's not a lot of good examples of zoning regulations for them, but that's something we're researching and hope to have something that addresses any concerns you have on that. The second module will be development standards, both through zoning and through subdivision. And then our final modules are processes and procedures, how we get projects entitled. So those are the three major modules that we're focusing on. And so what we're going to talk about today is because housing is going to be a big part of your permitting activity over the next several decades, based, if nothing else, on the way you're growing, we're going to put on the table some issues relating to how land use controls in the UDC relate to housing and housing costs in the city. And of course, this is a big balancing act. On one side of the ledger, existing neighborhoods are concerned about their quality of life. They're concerned about, as you discussed with item 6 today, things like traffic and crime and all sorts of things that affect the quality of life and health and safety of residents. They're concerned about some environmental issues, your streams and trees and things like that in the city, and just what the city looks like in general. And those are all affected by how long it takes to get through the permitting process, how expensive it is for a subdivider, for example, or a home builder to comply with standards that are in the UDC, how the code is enforced. And there's one issue specifically we'll raise a little bit later that goes to, I know you're, or I've been told you're looking at updating your building code to the 2021 International Building Code. I guess that's something that's under discussion in the community. So there may be, that may have some impacts back to us on, what uses, some uses that are allowable under the IBC, and associated fees and so forth. So a little context on housing, just some recent local estimates. Justin did a terrific job putting a lot of this together for us. Nationally, the median home price for new construction is $431,000. Statewide, it's ranges from 300 to 350. We're a little less expensive than that right now in Temple. New home costs tend to range from 250 to 300,000. But that ranges by building type, as you can see. So the tiny homes, which is something that's part of the 2021 International Residential Code Appendix, is something that we see a demand for in different contexts and communities, and those costs can range from 30 to 80,000, depending upon what's added to the home and et cetera. Accessory dwelling units that we'll talk about a little later can range from 50 to 150,000. Manufactured homes, 60 to 150,000. Condos and townhouses, a little less expensive typically than a single family detached house, and so are duplexes. And according to the National Association of Home Builders, about 60% of a home's sales price is attributable to construction costs, some of which are attributable to zoning, some of which are accounted for by other factors. So, what uses we allow in zoning, what densities are allowed in each of the zoning districts, and et cetera, have an impact on all of that. Was somebody trying to say something, or did I?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we're looking at 5 different areas, basically, to affect, and these are things that can affect housing costs positively or negatively. One are ways to increase the supply of housing to keep up with the demand that you're going to get and are getting now. Looking at lot size and unit sizes. So lot size, can directly affect the supply of housing, and unit size can affect the cost. Looking at development standards like parking, for example. So flexibility with our parking ratios could help minimize housing costs and also have some other benefits. But, it's a big discussion item. I don't want to just, take my viewpoint on this and run with it without hearing from the community first and hearing from you all, as well as infrastructure and street design and the function of housing is important for quality of life, but complying with that can also have an impact on the price tag of housing, as well as how long it takes to get through the permitting process and how predictable that is. So some of the council considerations, and we're going to sprinkle some of this, some of these questions throughout the presentation, and jump in even before you hear these if you have something that you want to discuss. But we sprinkled some of these in just so we can turn some of this discussion over to you. But as you hear what we're talking about, we'd like to hear from y'all what your sense is about which of these tools, which of this direction is the best way to optimize the cost and quality of housing in Temple. Quality is a great thing and lower costs are a great thing, but sometimes they're not always consistent with each other. We want to make sure that we get that balance right for the city of Temple. So the first thing are the ways to increase the supply of housing. Increasing the supply of housing can support the tax base. It can support retail and mixed use that needs employers, and they need people. If you're opening a restaurant, you need housing for the people that work at that restaurant. Then we need places for people who live here, are aging in place and want to find a place to stay in Temple, as opposed to having to maybe move to another community that has ways for people to retire more affordably. It'd be great if they can retire here and keep their money circulating in Temple. Places for young professionals that are working at the medical center, for example, and places for people with single incomes. And so, some of the things that other communities are doing, and we've looked at a lot of other communities in Texas. I know Justin did when he was putting this together. For example, several like Sherman and McKinney, and it's a growing trend around the country, is looking at accessory dwelling units. And we'll talk a little bit later about what those are. Those are basically, some people call them granny flats or echo units or whatnot. But if you have a detached garage in your backyard, for example, you can improve the top of that and rent that out to a person who's going to college here or working at the medical center or something. So I know my neighborhood that has those. I live in a traditional neighborhood development. They allow those, and they're not very common, but they're here, and people do rent those. It supplements their income and provides affordable places for people to live. One thing you hear talked about in urban planning a lot nowadays too is this concept of middle housing. And what that is not relying exclusively on single family detached, which tends to be more expensive sometimes, and also takes up more land than some other development types. I mean, that's going to be, and everybody I think recognizes that's going to be an important part, and likely the most important part of Temple's housing market in the future. But we also want to explore other ways to introduce housing products for folks at other income levels. And one thing that gets talked about is middle housing, which is that range of lower scale housing that's designed in a way that's compatible in scale with, for example, an existing single family detached neighborhood versus the high rise, which a lot of communities introduce, and the scale is overwhelming to existing neighborhoods. The traffic can be overwhelming, and so ways to transition better to existing single family neighborhoods is an important part of what we're looking at, as well as mixed use, like vertical mixed use apartments on top of retail is something that we could accommodate in a center along I-35 or something like that. So there are other ways to accommodate this as well. So we're looking at right sizing housing supply, and we're thinking about this in each of these in terms of the quality and the cost that goes along with it. So providing a range of housing options are ways to provide good quality housing, especially if we have good design controls in place so that it isn't wrapped by a giant parking lot, for example. It's in a more walkable layout, that sort of thing. And those are places that are attractive to retirees, to young professionals, and et cetera. On the other hand, yes, we're going to have low density. We're going to have low density on the perimeter of Temple, but if that's the only option, that can become an expensive thing for the city over time as well. Typically, in most communities that have studied this, the tax revenues that the city generates from that kind of housing often doesn't pay its own way for infrastructure. And so while that will continue to be part of what we have, how that's built, how that's designed can affect, how the city's, what the city can expect to see financially from it. At the middle end of the range, accessory dwelling, middle housing, and we'll show some examples of that later. Fourplexes, triplexes, those sorts of things are a way to, a way to transition well to existing neighborhoods and to transition to areas where higher densities might be appropriate. And the cost of those tends to be fairly moderate. And what the comprehensive plan policies talk about, and something we'd like to avoid is just homogeneous neighborhoods, just single family, low density everywhere. We need other products as well as density that supports those. So some of the considerations for council and some of the discussion we'd like to have for y'all are sort of your sense of where accessory dwelling units are appropriate in the city. Are they appropriate everywhere? I mean, is every zoning district something that could absorb something like this and something you're willing to look at? Or is this something that you'd like to see only in certain parts of the city? Also duplexes, and we're going to talk about something in the details of this later on, but what we call twins. They look like duplexes, but they're owned. They're a two-family unit separated by an imaginary lot line in the middle. So they may look like duplexes, but they're an ownership unit. And vertical mixed use, corner stores and live work in places where we have apartments on top of retail as opposed to apartments that are siloed in different parts of the city. And your only option to shop or to visit the library or something else is to drive. Is that something the council supports? And if so, are there areas of the city that you'd like to focus on? So is that something y'all'd like to weigh in on now? And if not, I can keep going. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Historic district where we raised our kids, the accessory dwelling units are abundant there. And we had two of them, and we always had very good experiences. I mean, Mayor currently lives in the house that my kids grew up in. So I mean, you see a lot of the garage apartments, and they house UMHB students or, maybe a traveling nurse or something like that. And so I've only seen that there. Is that something that we don't have in the other sides of town?
I don't
No,
think so.
just-
A lot of restrictive covenants would stop it in a lot of the newer
Neighborhoods, yeah.
Okay.
And I think in a lot of, over in that area, I think the lots are, in some cases, the lots are larger to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit without, it seemed like you're overly crowded.
Mhm. Most of them seem to be on top of a garage.
Yeah.
So it's not more lot, yeah.
My
Okay.
sense is that often accessory dwelling units, as you're describing in the historic district, as I'm familiar with there and elsewhere in the country, fit well in over garages, two-story buildings. Lots of the city with single-family homes are one-story housing that doesn't fit quite as well unless you had an accessory, a separate unit on the lot. Then you have the driveway issues, et cetera.
Yeah. We see some downtown too.
Yes.
The live work. Live work. I think Kenny Martin had a
Yes.
couple of those downtown, and that they seem to be full, from my understanding. Seems to be something people are looking for.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And as you, Mark, have discussed over, commercial corner stores, live, work, that kind of thing, as Jessica's just referring to. We're starting to see that downtown, and it's very appealing.
Okay,
But
very
for-
good.
Perspective, it somehow fits some buildings and doesn't fit other buildings architecturally.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, and it's something I've also seen in a suburban context outside of a traditional downtown. I know the city I live in here, it's next to Kansas City. We're suburban. Like you all, we have 435 that runs through the middle of our city, and we have a new retail center that has apartments above Pilates studios and retail and restaurants and things like that. So I've seen it in other contexts as well. So is that something y'all could support too in new parts of Temple?
Yes.
Certainly can.
I mean, like, after the mall would be a good location for
Absolutely.
mixed use and not in downtown.
Yeah, duplexes concern me.
Okay.
I to become a duplex city. I I don't know, I'm just a little hesitant when it comes to that, but, sorry, Mike.
I have real concerns with how things blend in architecturally.
Okay.
Visual appearances are a high priority for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we'll have some more detail on duplexes and sort of our tentative direction on those a little later in the presentation. So appreciate that. Great.
While you're
oh.
talking, Mark, but just let me interject there. While you're talking about duplexes, I represent District 3, which includes South Fifth Street, Lowe's Drive, the Lowe's area, the mall, and a lot of duplexes that have been built abutting the mall, abutting Lowe's. If you can visualize that at all, I received just non-stop calls about those duplexes going in, how horrible it was going to be, and I think they're fitting in quite well, and the location abutting Lowe's, abutting the mall, close to the hospital, is servicing a community that it's very good in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah, Susan, I think what maybe might have made that more aesthetic if there was some type of difference in the way they
Yeah,
looked. You know,
exactly.
they're all looked
Exactly.
the same.
Some height, some low,
Yeah,
more plantings, etc. That kind of thing would have been a plus.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Yeah, and what I hear a lot too is garage placement, is a big thing. When they're all garage in the front and then an entire front yard is paved over, it's a much different appearance than if the garages access an alley, for example. So those are some things I think we can look at, along with some of the different housing products.
We've had problems in Temple with some duplexes and homes that have been built, again in District 3, where they've been built and have been bought for rentals. And the rentals are for multiple cars then. So the streets are very crowded, the driveways are crowded, lack of controls in that sense. And other people within those same neighborhoods are bitterly unhappy.
Okay. Okay. So we'll also take a look at, parking issues as well, and, making sure that those are managed properly. And one of the things we wanted to show you as well, because one of the concepts we've been talking about is what we call an alternative residential district, which would replace your manufactured housing district. It would allow manufactured homes. It would allow other products as well. Maybe a tiny home community. It's something that, I think, Brian, I think you mentioned you've got one here. I know in Kansas City, this was one, we have one for homeless veterans, for example. They used tiny homes as a way to allow folks like that to get off the streets, get jobs and reintegrate back into, the community and to have a nice, decent, safe place to live. So this alternative housing or alternative residential district may be one way to address things like that, but would also give you a way to, this isn't something we would just map in advance. Somebody would have to go through the rezoning process, and you would get to work out, what conditions and et cetera, they would build under. So other communities, McKinney near Dallas, have used similar types of options to accommodate different housing products that are things you need, but maybe things we don't want to just permit without any oversight. The second issue we want to talk about too were smaller lot sizes or just revisiting and right sizing lot sizes. Lowering minimum lot sizes lowers land costs, it lowers development costs per unit, lowers costs for materials, that sorts of things. It's a way to maybe allow single family detached products, maybe at the edge of a commercial center or something like that before you get to existing single-family neighborhoods. It also increases the tax base per area. We just completed a UDC update for a community outside of Dallas, and one of our sub-consultants actually studied this and showed examples of how smaller lot sizes actually benefited the city financially over time, and allowed for more cost revenues, more cost efficiencies with infrastructure and that sort of thing. And a lot of communities around the country who've studied that have shown that. So, and that's not to say there's not a place for larger lot sizes in the community. That we're not saying there's not a place for executive housing and things like that. What that's going to happen, but we'd like to re-explore, ways to create a more diverse range of housing and lot sizes in Temple, while avoiding the high costs you get by demanding more lot area per house, for example, and maybe creating some options like a cluster or a conservation subdivision where maybe we have a maximum density, but not a minimum lot size that would allow for a range of products, that can accommodate different consumer preferences in the marketplace. One example we'll show a little later are things like cottage courts, which are something we're seeing more of a demand for around the country. I have one just a 2-3 minute walk from where I live, in a TND, and it's a great place for retirees and folks like that. And again, one of the things we're looking at is ways to avoid just a sameness and a ubiquitous development pattern, and a way to achieve cost savings for development with less square footage. So, some of the considerations for council are, what are your concerns about reducing lot sizes? I mean, when do they become too small? And that probably, obviously that's going to vary throughout a city the size of Temple. What are your senses of the benefits and risks of regulating density as opposed to regulating minimum lot size, and eliminating minimum lot size, at least for some development options, like a conservation subdivision? And a conservation subdivision is something where, let's say you have 100 acres, you've got, maybe it's your agricultural district. We have a minimum 1 acre lot size. You couldn't possibly get, more than 100 homes there. In fact, you're probably going to get more like 80 or 70 when you add infrastructure and things like that. So instead of saying we're going to have a minimum lot size of 1 acre, we'll say you can't have more than X number of lots, but you got to reserve X% of your project as open space. Maybe in parts of Temple, natural open space where you have a stream or a forest or something like that. But to make that work, the designer needs some flexibility. And so eliminating minimum lot size allows them to have smaller lots, maybe some townhomes or duplexes or twins sprinkled in on corner lots, those sorts of things. And, we'd like your thoughts too on what kinds of neighborhoods is something like that, something where we could think less about minimum lot size and more on a flexible density standard in lieu of that. Does this sound like something that's heading in the right direction for you all, or are there concerns that you would have with this?
Feels reasonable to me.
My only concern would be sort of, I don't want to say artificially because that's not right, but restricting the number of lots in a conservation type setting would obviously send the cost of each lot that was going to be built on up, I would think. And so are you achieving what you want to, as far as affordability goes, by using the conservation concept? That's just the first thought in my mind.
Sure. One of the ways we've dealt with this before, because what we typically face is, communities are concerned about density and they're concerned about traffic and things like that. That's why we have a limit. We don't just say you can build as many. I don't know anybody in the country that says you can build as many lots as you can squeeze onto the property as long as you give us some open space. But what we often look at in lieu of that is an incentive. Like, you could get 80 lots maybe if, you build a conventional subdivision with conventional street design and that sort of thing. If you do a conservation subdivision, you get, maybe half of your project is natural open space and it's reserved for that. We'll let you build more. Maybe you can build 90 or 100 lots. And so you get to build more. We don't regulate minimum lot size, so you can design that however it works for you. We also, and I know in San Antonio, when we set up a use pattern for conservation subdivisions, we had special street designs. So maybe in your ag districts, it's more of a urban street pattern. Closer into the city, you'd have sidewalks or something like that. And I know you don't require those in all subdivisions today. So those are some offsetting things, but yeah, certainly if we didn't regulate density and didn't have minimum lot sizes, that would maximize affordability. But is that something that the council would accept? Any thoughts about that?
I would accept that. I understand what the mayor said a moment ago, and I completely understand it. But before you came on, we were discussing an issue that's before council tonight that our school district has opposition to at this moment. And without having spoken to the school district with specificity on this particular plan, in general, the district's view is they would like to see more upper middle income housing built and come to Temple rather than a middle and lower income on an obvious level, trying to change some of the parameters within the school district. So the issue runs, the smaller lot size becomes small, you have lesser building costs, you can sell or rent to someone who can pay less. That's obviously not necessarily bad, and we do want to meet the needs of that population. But we also, at least some people within the community, want to push changing some of the demographics within the community also. The economic demographics.
That's interesting because that's consistent. Yeah, with our initial meetings, we spoke with the school district as well. And I think they understand too that there's a need for affordability. But yes, I think there's also a sense that they'd like some of the other product as well that accommodates households at a higher income and that sort of thing. I can also tell you, like in a T&D too, the houses can be pretty expensive, even though they're on smaller lots. So it just depends. And again, that can depend on the design quality and other considerations as well. So
Mark?
it's a good
Yeah,
point.
sorry to interrupt, this is Brian. I just want to translate for the non-planners in the room. T&D is a traditional neighborhood development.
Right. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry about throwing an acronym at you.
Less about the size of the lot, but more about what's being built on it.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that our standards are high enough that we don't get these national builders that come in and just throw something down. We don't have that issue with our local builders. They live here, and so they're very conscious about what they build. But that my concern is not the lot size, but what's being built on there and how we can keep those standards high.
Everything she says, I certainly agree with the exception of, even though our local builders are very good, there's an enormous similarity of what's built, not much diversity in appearance. And appearance, again, I've said this before, is very important to me. When you talked about tiny houses, there's a wonderful development in Austin that is really artistically tiny houses, and each house is artistically very, very different. Obviously, that's not something we want to do lots of, but visually changing, having some diversity within each area promotes visual interest.
Okay. Good. So we have good support for design. It sounds like good support for reasonable design requirements and for new housing.
I like the regulating density, as you're talking about, not also, well, you were talking about it mostly for open space. But that also can allow for one neighborhood to have some large lots and then some smaller lots, and the aging in place that you're talking about. When you have kids, you want the big house and big lot. As you get older, you want to move down, and that you can age in the same neighborhood, then that allows that, without having to have a PD with all the different, this area is going to be this and this area is going to be this, up front. Gives the flexibility to do that too.
Excellent.
Certainly. Yeah, great point. Because, well, we'll talk about permitting a little later, but one of the things I think ideally we'd like to get away from is doing everything by PD. And you shouldn't have to use PD to achieve higher quality development. We'd like to bake that into the code as much as possible, and also let developers know what's expected of them before they start negotiating something. And not having to rely on a negotiation, which usually is pretty time consuming, and it's unpredictable, not just for the applicant, but for people who live nearby. So that's something we're trying to bake into the code. So I appreciate that comment. Okay. The next thing we're talking about is, and this is something that comes up a lot. This is a kind of a national trend, is at a bare minimum, right sizing parking. There's a number of communities around the country who've just eliminated parking minimums. I think, some communities, and I think communities like Temple have been not as enthusiastic about that, which I could understand. I mean, you don't have light rail or anything like that in Temple. It's a community where most people tend to drive where they need to go. At the same time, if we can at least right size our parking requirements, that would obviously reduce development costs, which can translate into lower or manageable housing cost for new development. It can free up land for more valuable space. One thing about parking, if I own a shopping center, I'm not charging people for parking spaces. That's not rentable space, but if I have more opportunities to put apartments on top and to add maybe a grid pattern to that shopping center and redevelop it without thinking so much about covering the site with parking, it's more valuable to me. It's a more valuable site. It's going to be more tax revenue for Temple over time than a parking space that pretty much gets used at max capacity on Christmas Eve and sits empty the rest of the year. So that in turn can lower housing costs for residents existing and new in Temple, and create opportunities for things that you have in your comprehensive plan that talks about creating opportunities for walking and biking, which we'll see in the near future, and maybe someday, better transit opportunities in Temple. So those are some of the things that would go along with parking. And it would increase quality by creating better opportunities to integrate sites that include a variety of housing types with existing neighborhoods through walkability, and eliminate the costs associated with both building and maintaining parking areas that aren't used all the time or that go unused. And having adequate parking, maybe with some in the front and some of the back, can create opportunities for better design, and open up the ways to create demand-based parking as opposed to just parking based on a ratio in our code, creating opportunities to share parking. For example, a church that meets on Sunday that has a lot of parking that they could rent to a community or a business or an apartment complex maybe nearby that uses that parking every single day. And maybe reducing parking where you have greater demands for walkability, more frequent bus headways, those sorts of things. So this is a way to, reduce the, you know, ex- the dead space you see with parking fields that get 120 degrees or hotter in your hot Texas summers. Saving costs at the same time. So, for council, is this a direction that you all support? Can we, are there areas of Temple that we can integrate in new areas with parking design and other site factors like pedestrian access, shade, multimodal transportation, and what are some ways that we can make parking more flexible in Temple? Is right sizing parking something that at least you support? A lot of times when we update, we've done UDC updates. I know the Institute for Transportation Engineers in 2019 created a new parking generation manual where they studied sites around the country and came up with the typical ratio on a weekday and on a weekend and so forth. And that's something we typically look at. And when we do, the parking ratios that most communities apply typically fall. That makes sure that you have the parking that you need, but we're not demanding too much parking. And so is that something that makes sense to you all? Are there any concerns or any thoughts about this direction?
I would think it would have to be near residences or it's not gonna work as well. People aren't gonna ride all the way across town on their bicycle or walk.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would apply that.
What?
I'm not sure how, I think we're doing some of that downtown,
Yeah.
with the parking
Okay.
garage. But, I don't know how, other than downtown, I'm not sure how we would apply something like that locally. Unless you went to the higher density and had, for residential areas and had, sort of a communal parking area, but I'm not sure that that's what you're talking about.
Sure. Is this something like for a mixed use development along I-35? Like if a shopping center redeveloped, added some apartments, created a lot and block pattern, added apartments above retail maybe in a place like that. Is that something that would work in an environment like that, even outside of downtown?
I think so.
Okay.
In that kind of environment, but back to what I said earlier about an area that has been built and is turned into rental. Each rental has 2 to 3 trucks now. This is Truck City. And it's really unappealingly attractive, not attractive.
Okay. So the duplexes, things like that, that aren't in a mixed use context, in a mixed use environment, we should keep the parking at least where it is, I would think, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Seems like it.
Mark, this is Brian. I just wanted to follow up on the concept, just to make sure that council understands that the term right sizing the parking so that to evaluate our parking ratios, so we're not requiring more than is needed. And so I would assume that y'all are okay with looking at our ratios to make sure we're not requiring excess parking for retail, primarily multifamily. Okay, because I would have anticipated that y'all would be open to looking at that, because that is a significant cost. I mean, all the implications when you require additional parking that otherwise that cost could go into more landscaping.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify.
It seems like, Brian, what we're talking about, I was telling this to Aaron, we're talking about the timing of the use of parking. Right?
Yeah,
That's what we're
absolutely.
talking about.
Absolutely. Parking right now, our parking ratios are designed to accommodate the peak hour,
Right.
worst case scenario all the time.
Right.
And so TMED, of course, has shared parking ratios. That's a place where it's successful to say, look, just a little coordination, and this business can coordinate with this business, and they may have different peak hours, those
Right.
uses that actually complement each other, and so they lower their costs, but they, and
Anybody still gets the parking.
Yeah.
And Brian and Mark, in the hopes that at some point in the future, the mall will be redeveloped in some
Right.
form or another. This is exactly the kind of thing that we would want to take into account in the hopes that it will be multi-use and not just all one thing or the other.
Right, exactly, because, and last on this, Mark, so our code right now is written so that every use that is in a particular project, that we're supposed to evaluate what parking is required for that use, and then all the other uses, evaluate the parking independently, add those parking space requirements together, like the mall. And so what you get is this sea of parking that is never full.
So we're trying to address the need for variability and addressing a redevelopment such as the mall, if it were.
Sure, just looking at some of that flexibility where it makes sense.
Yes, flexibility.
I think
not
that makes great
variability.
sense.
Great sense.
It's a non-example, but I think that's gonna happen at, what's the brewing company that's across the street from the church up west?
Oh, right, Bold Republic.
Old Republic, it's not open when they're having church and there's.
Well, yeah.
That's an odd.
And you got the daycare next door who understandably, they're not.
Doesn't want
You don't want,
but
but yes, that's a good example of, maybe some of those uses to at least open that door for them to coordinate and, yeah.
Thank you.
Right. I appreciate it. Thanks, Brian, for jumping in. I appreciate that.
Yes,
That's a good explanation. Our next category is infrastructure. Subdivision regulations, zoning regulations require things like parks and schools and or at least land for schools often. And just like with parking, we don't want to require too little. We don't want to require too much. We want to make sure that we get the right balance. If we require too much, the cost per dwelling unit goes up. Often we find with higher density areas, and especially areas like I described earlier, that mall that redevelops, people live in an apartment above the storefront. They don't usually you don't find families with 4 kids living in that, so they don't generate as much. Their student generation rate tends to be lower than a single family subdivision, for example, that is really built for families, with 2, 3, 4 kids or more. We want to make sure that the value works for the community, that it's built around the values explained in your long range comprehensive plan. And we have opportunities not just for people to drive, but also for people to walk and opportunities for accessibility. So, in terms of quality, we want high curb appeal. That's great. We want street design that works for the context of the community that they're in. Of course, if we went to requiring sidewalks, and that would be something in a higher density community, maybe not the subdivisions like you've gotten, traditionally in Temple, there's a cost with that. There's a cost with alleys, especially if they're two directional. I know the one I have an alley because I live in a traditional neighborhood development, and our alleys are 10 to 12 feet wide and they work just fine. And if I see somebody coming towards me in one direction, I just head the other direction. It's never been an issue in a year and a half. So in terms of our moderate quality, we want to balance curb appeal with walkability and accessibility. Maybe wide sidewalks on one side of the street or using pedestrian pathways through a development. And so, having baseline criteria for that, for alleys and other things, like accessory dwellings is something we want to look at. From the city's long range planning policies and some of the things, that we've heard in our outreach, we want to make sure we don't have subdivisions that lack curb appeal. We want to make sure we don't have subdivisions where if there's an opportunity, and it makes sense that there's no sidewalks. You know, I mentioned, I listened to the discussion on item number 6 and the concern about trucks and vehicles driving and kids running into the street. We want to make sure that there's a safety factor there, that the kids have sidewalks and pedestrians have sidewalks to walk on and don't have to compete with cars speeding down. And alleyways is a way to create that separation, but there's also a cost associated with them. Any developer will let you know that if we have alleys that, that they cost something to build, and sometimes they're more expensive than your conventional street design. So some of the examples we saw were, for example, Alamo Heights, Texas restricts driveways in the front setbacks for lots that are where the frontages are less than 65 feet. McKinney's an example of a community that requires lots that are less than 50 feet to have alley access along the rear. So that's a way to have that curb appeal at the front. What you see at the frontage of those developments is you see, nice front porches and maybe a combination of a mix of things like front porches and stoops and other frontage types. So there's a variety. And instead of driveways, the driveways are in the back along the alley. I like to call the alleys in my community, they're sort of the junk drawer of the community. That's where your garages and your driveways and things like that are.
Can work if
So-
the alleys can't be having to, we can't make them build the alleys to a street standard. Cause then you're just doubling up on your streets and your lot's gonna cost a whole lot more, so. We have to do
Certainly.
something, how we build them, different than we are today.
Thank you. Yes, and that's something we would certainly take a look at. I'm not a fan of two directional alleys or excessively wide alleys. And especially if your lots or especially if your blocks are short, I don't think that's necessary. And typically, I know the community I live in, the fire hydrants are along the street. They're not along the alleys. So the fire truck doesn't have to worry about how it gets down a 12-foot alleyway. They go on the other side of the street if there's a fire. So, that's something we would certainly take a look at. So, some of the discussion points, for council or the baseline criteria that you're looking for infrastructure that accommodates, and of course our infrastructure needs to accommodate cars in Temple. That's a reality. Like the council member mentioned earlier, you're a 3-truck city, and that's a reality. So we have to make sure that we plan for that and code for that accordingly. But there's also opportunities in a city growing the way Temple is, for a more mixed use environment, for a more urban street cross section and that sort of thing. It's not what you'd want everywhere, but that's something that's missing in the UDC today. And is that a direction that's good to head in? And are there any concerns y'all have about that? I know the concern about excessively designing alleys is one that was brought up. Are there any others that y'all might have?
We're shaking our heads no.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can you see us or just hear us?
I can see you. Yes, I
Okay.
can see you as well.
You see it shaking no.
Right. The screen's a little small where you all are, but yeah, I can see your head nods or head shaking too. Other consideration too are, incentives for alleyways, like on larger density development or smaller lot frontages. Those are places that we could require or at least allow for alleys that are designed a certain way. And it sounds like, that goes along with the urban cross sections I was talking about earlier. And I think from your answer to the prior question, it would be the same here. So any other concerns about that? If not, I'll keep going, and we can certainly circle back to it later. Flexible design standards is the other thing we're taking a look at. Creating variety as opposed to cookie cutter, and that includes, design standards include things not just parking, but also right sizing landscaping requirements. You know, you don't need the same kind of landscaping and green space in your downtown, or maybe a new mixed-use development that's more urban in character than the design you would get in a suburban subdivision or a suburban shopping center. So that's one thing we're looking at to emphasize variety over a sameness or a cookie cutter development, creating cost-effective options over one size fits all. One example of that is parks, and we've had some preliminary discussions with that and some other communities I'm working in around the country. There's a county south of Richmond, Virginia, we're looking at in Oklahoma City. We're working with them and creating a menu of what we call amenity space, as opposed to requiring every subdivision to provide traditional parks. Traditional parks are great for a conventional suburban subdivision that's single family detached units, and that's something you require now. But maybe for a more urban setting, that's something you wouldn't want, or even you wouldn't want to require. There's other options that make more sense and that are more cost effective for a subdivision like that. So we're looking at, you know, those types of options to encourage a better public realm, you know, better places for people to walk, and to make sure that infrastructure and other requirements like parks aren't excessively designed for the communities that they're in. We want to have, you know, at the middle range, a variety of design options from, you know, your traditional park or even passive open space on the fringe of Temple now, to things like an urban plaza, you know, for a subdivision that would have, you know, that has townhouses and some of those middle housing options and maybe corner stores, those sorts of things, and making sure we don't over design those communities with traditional parks. You know, that create value add, but also, you know, lower costs per unit. And the thing we're trying to avoid at the lower end of the quality spectrum is a weak public realm where people don't have places outside, or that don't have a sense of community, and a lack of design features. And, you know, we're looking at making the right things easy and not just achieving all of this through just regulatory mandates. So like for frontages, creating a menu of options. This is what Alamo Heights has, for example. So things like bay windows, stoops, front porches on the upper right, those sorts of things, dormers. You know, we wouldn't require all of that for every development. We want to make sure that developments have the opportunity to provide a variety of those, as opposed to one size fits all. So in terms of what you heard, are things like common parking courts, as opposed to, you know, every townhome has to have 3 parking, maybe some spillover parking, so you don't have parking wrapping that wraps every single unit. Amenity spaces, as opposed to just traditional parks, and flexible frontage options. So those are those things that sound like they make sense to you all, or are there any concerns you have with those?
They make sense to me, and I wonder if there's another bullet you might consider adding in the same area. As we redevelop older neighborhoods, infill parks, in areas where there's empty spaces or housing comes down as older neighborhoods are redeveloped, infill parks can be really very appealing to neighborhoods. Small
Okay.
pockets, in other words.
Certainly. So pocket parks in places where you have those redevelopment opportunities makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. Okay. And the other consideration too, and you know, we can never forget how projects get entitled. So one thing we're looking at is going through the UDC, making sure our standards are clear and easy to understand. That's something if you're a developer going through the process, having standards that are unclear and subject to interpretation, or subject to conditions that land on you know, end up in your lap at the last minute after you've done a lot of planning and engineering. You know, those are things that can drive up costs and create project delays. We want to lessen our reliance on plan unit development, and try to codify as much as we have, and you know, any conditions that you tend to apply over time, over and over again with plan development. If we can put those in the code so people understand those up front without making them so excessively detailed that we've created this tight little box that, that developers can't work around when they need to and when it makes sense. And of course, cutting red tape and, making sure that, the project, the process in Temple is as efficient as we can make it in terms of the time that it takes to get development through the process is something that we're taking a look at. So any way we can streamline the process and make it more efficient, I think is a way to increase quality by making sure that developers are spending their money on better design, as opposed to spending more money on attorneys and engineers, than they have to, and avoiding longer process times and those soft costs that go along with them. Expediting the process for priority projects, like if somebody's providing affordable housing or housing that's reserved for something that's a public benefit, is something that makes sense in a lot of communities, and eliminating unnecessary steps in the process and making sure that the standards are written as well as they can, as well as, and as predictably as we can get them. Some communities are even looking at things like pre-approved housing plans. I worked with a community here in the Kansas City area where we had some pre-approved plans for infill projects, where a developer could just look at it and, they can use those plans and a variety of them, and it's worked really well in encouraging new development on smaller lots in places that historically got passed over. And avoiding inefficiencies. So that's the low quality spectrum that we're trying to avoid, and shorter process times, that allow developers to save money. So is that something, is that something that makes sense to council in terms of consolidating all procedures in one place in the UDC, making sure we've simplified the procedures as much as possible, and eliminating unnecessary review, and, eliminating the need to use plan development as a default item? Is that something that sounds like something you all can support, or are there any concerns you have with going in that direction?
The lawyer's telling me yes. I think staff would be very amenable to that.
I would just interject that, and I'm sure I'm wrong here, but I thought that the PD process gave us some sense of security and control over what was being planned.
It does, but it's where the code is, generally it's where the code is currently lacking.
Okay.
And otherwise would give the certainty and the upfront understanding about what the requirements are. And you all would have that certainty too of, okay, this is what is going to be required.
Because the UDC.
Because it's in the code.
Because it's in the, okay, I see. Thank
Right.
you.
And your control would be this process, right? Going through and making sure that the design standards and things like that we come up with are things that have that balance that's right for the city of Temple. So that's where the control comes in. And, there's always that weird project that, it's an arena or something like that just doesn't fit in any of the boxes where, PD's an option, for you to process something like that. But if we can codify things and avoid having to go through that process every single time, that's a win-win, usually for cities, for both applicants and the city. So this is just a summary of everything, things that are high quality, as well as, the things that add to costs, things that are lower quality, homogeneous, housing. We don't want a lot of the same housing in a high density pattern. If we're going to get higher densities, we want to make sure there's some diversity in design. That's something we heard today. We want to make sure that we avoid those procedures and avoid excessive design that would unnecessarily add to the cost of development. So this slide's just kind of a summary of that. So in terms of some of the specifics, some of these details that you heard about earlier that we're working through in the drafting process, this is a description of the major housing types that we're looking at that would be in your use table, and how we would define them, where we'd go, and the type of design criteria we'd apply to them. And the first one is the one we started off with earlier, which is accessory dwellings. And there's a lot of configurations. This one up here on the, the picture on the upper left-hand corner is what you've seen most of in Temple in your historic neighborhoods. That's your classic garage apartment or an independent unit that's detached. But there's a lot of other configurations as well. I mean, in some places, people can put them in their attic, or maybe they retrofit a basement or a lower level that has a separate entry in the back or something like that. That would be a place folks could live. And this wouldn't supersede restrictive covenants. If you live in a subdivision where the covenants and CC&Rs and your codes, covenants and restrictions don't allow for them, well, this wouldn't change it. But for new neighborhoods where that's an appropriate thing for people buying into those neighborhoods, that's something we could allow. And right now, they're mostly allowed in addition to your historic districts, mostly in your office, neighborhood service, some of your non-residential districts where you don't have a lot of housing right now anyway. And we're looking, in addition to residential locations, agricultural areas. If you have a 1 acre lot and you have a house that's pulled back from the street, you've got room for something like this. So we're looking at maybe adding it there. And other districts where you have utilities in place that can absorb this, maybe places that have alleys, or new neighborhoods, new subdivisions that might have alleys, or you meet a minimum lot size requirement. And so your existing criteria, you limit the number of units, you have some area limitations, occupancy limitations, parking requirements. We wouldn't want a site just to be covered with a bunch of cars now because we allowed an extra unit. But we're looking at being precise about the types and what they look like, having some of those height and scale standards and compatibility standards. Utility metering has come up, and addressing to make sure that, if you have somebody has an incident, they have a heart attack or something, and EMS has to, send a truck down there, that they know where to find these things. And owner occupancy is an issue in some areas, and some states don't allow those kinds of regulations. Others do. I don't think Texas has addressed this, but in a lot of states and a lot of communities, they say, the code will require that if you have an accessory dwelling, the owner has to occupy the principal dwelling. We don't want, build to rent neighborhoods that are just built with both a house and an accessory dwelling. And now you've kind of changed the character of a neighborhood. So those are some of the standards that we're looking at, in the code. This is one where I know at the staff level, we've had a lot of discussion, and because this has come up a lot, and I know it got a big response today with y'all, but and these next two slides go together, the duplex and the twin. Basically, functionally, in a lot of ways, the same land use. They're just, the ownership pattern is different. With a duplex, they're typically built to rent. You have 2 units on one lot. You have an owner who would rent each of those units to different households. They can be side by side or stacked or on a corner lot. Right now, you allow those in your 2F, your multifamily districts, and your non-residential. We're looking at maybe in appropriate locations in conservation or cluster subdivisions. Maybe if you meet certain conditions, minimum lot size, if you're on a corner lot or something where you have maybe a front porch that faces each corner, and alley access, or maybe a driveway that goes to the rear. So some of your existing standards we would preserve and carried forward, your minimum lot area, garage and driveway standards, some of your design standards, but also looking at different frontage options like we showed you earlier, like Alamo Heights has, so that we can accommodate this product in the right locations, in the city of Temple, but making sure that what's built there is something that fits in with your single family neighborhoods. The other side of this ledger is, again, these look like duplexes. They have two entries along the front, but there's an imaginary lot line. The people who live in that unit on the left on that upper picture also own the lot underneath it. It's just that the houses tend to be attached. And this became a source of confusion talking about the technical details, where we were calling these single family attached without realizing that that's how Temple currently designs like a townhouse, where instead of just 2 units, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 attached in a townhouse pattern. The way most communities define single family attached is what we're showing here. So you allow those right now in your SFA districts, as well as all the others that we showed earlier, some of your TMED overlays. So we're looking on with TMED, creating a more coherent set of districts as opposed to the way it's defined today, and your I-35 overlays. And we're looking at also allowing this type in your alternative housing, this new district we're developing that would add to and replace your manufactured housing overlay, cluster and conservation options, and neighborhood infill in places where it might make sense. So in addition to your current minimum lot area, lot depth, your garage and driveway standards, and some of those standards that you have in place today, looking at streamlining standards in places where it might make sense, allowing that as an option for narrower private streets and flexible frontage types along, for newer subdivisions. We've also got the 3-family, your triplex option. And again, those can either be stacked or side by side. And so we're looking at some minor amendments or minor changes to how they're defined here. They're currently allowed in 2F with a conditional use permit. In your MF, your multifamily districts, in your office option 2, your O2 districts. We're looking at this also in mixed use districts and alternative housing, and maybe as an option in conservation and cluster. We're looking more at density and instead of minimum lot sizes, with some frontage types that we would define in the code for those. Townhouse, we're looking at revising this, and I think in practicality, the change probably wouldn't be noticeable as much on the ground. But here, this would be where you have at least 4 units that are attached side by side, as opposed to 3, which would be your triplex. Currently today, they're allowed in SFA 3, your TH, your townhouse districts, multifamily, and a lot of your non-residential and TMED districts. We're looking at also allowing those in your mixed use and alternative housing, lots that are served by alleys, on collector and higher order streets, and some of your transition areas between single family and higher intensity. In addition to existing some of your architectural and side yard standards, parking and parking location standards, also looking at allowing that as an option for private streets, as I mentioned earlier, and defining the frontages more clearly for townhouses. And then multifamily would be anything beyond townhouse, more than 4. Yeah, Brian?
Yes, sorry to interrupt, but I think we're gonna be able to go until 4 o'clock.
Okay. Well, I've only got a few more slides, so I can tie that up. So multifamily would be more than, anything more than that 4 households that we're talking about, or 4 dwelling units. Currently in your MF and in non-residential districts, we're looking also at areas that are served by alleys on collectors or transitional at lower density. And so in addition to your current standards, looking at options for narrower private streets, maybe allowing for on-street parking and providing for frontage types. Another option, this is one of your plan unit developments. That's the upper picture, the picture on the top, has what's known as cottage courts, or pocket neighborhoods is what they're called in some places. They're not defined in the ordinance today. This one obviously had to go through the plan unit development process to get built. We're looking at allowing those in alternative housing and other neighborhoods, and regulating the number of dwelling units, looking at setbacks, how they're oriented. They're usually oriented towards a common amenity space in the middle, with shared pedestrian paths and so forth. So that's something we're looking at adding to the code. We're looking at tiny homes, adding that as a use, because in Appendix AQ of the 2021 International Residential Code, that's a thing. So we want to get ahead of that and making sure that we've got those defined for clarity. They'd be allowed in alternative housing, maybe in conservation or clusters, and maybe infill settings as well. And so you don't have them defined or regulated today. So that's something that we're looking at. You don't have a minimum house size today. But we want to make sure that it's clear where tiny homes are allowed and where they're not, for clarity in the new code. And manufactured homes is another one. Today, they're only allowed in your MH zoning districts, your I-35 sub-districts. We're replacing that MH district with alternative housing, because this is just one type. And we want to make sure that in addition to, citing the federal HUD code, which is what those are built to, that we've got standards in place to make sure that if you're building something today, and new manufactured homes look different than the pre-HUD code type product typically anyway, but making sure that the frontage types and those sorts of things, requiring them on a permanent foundation and things like that, so that they become something where the quality is consistent than with what your expectations are in the city of Temple. So just in closing, just these last couple of slides, we'd like you to think about it. If you don't have anything today, but as we go forward in the process, things you've seen in other communities around Texas or even in other parts of the country that where you think this is something we could apply here in terms of housing types, housing designs, innovations for permitting, any other things that you can think of. So anything like that y'all can think of that you'd like us to know about or maybe explore further. Any thoughts on that? Any other places in Texas that you're aware of or that have gone this direction that you'd like to explore further?
You'll have multiple opportunities. If there's
Sure.
anything, send them to me or to David, and or our project managers, Cheryl and Jason. So yeah, if there are any photos or
Are you aware of the tiny house project I was referring to in Austin? That's very, very diverse.
I'm not.
I'll try to find.
So
I'll try to find some information.
that would be great.
It is so diverse and so interesting and so artistic.
Yeah, they can be done well.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, well, now's your opportunity for any other thoughts or questions that you have. And I know per Brian, we want to finish up by 4, not take up more of your time. But like Brian mentioned, our project managers are Jason and Cheryl, and I'm sure you all have their email and their contact information already, but here it is in case you don't. So any other thoughts or suggestions or questions you've got before we wrap up?
Mark, I'm gonna get with our city secretary to see if we can share these slides with council just to jog. They can refresh remember what's been discussed today.
certainly.
Mark, I'm related to this, but your city's going through a real tragedy, and just so you know, some of us are thinking of it.
Well, thank you. It was very sad, what happened yesterday. But I appreciate you thinking of us. One of our, on my city council where I live, one of our council members lost his sister. She was the person who died. So yeah, it's a
The
tragedy.
radio announcer, the DJ lady.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, yeah. She was married. She was a sister, yeah, of one of our city council members. So yeah, thanks for keeping us in your thoughts.
Mr. White, thank you for your time. You give us a lot of good ideas, things that we're not currently doing. So a lot of food for thought. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the discussion.
You bet. Thank
Your
you.
great ideas.
All right. Next item is, Ms. Bernard.
Yes,
Tracy, about how long do you
I
think?
got, I think, 45 slides.
We're bumping into the 79. So,
It's first quarter financial, 25% of the year complete.
okay.
Not a lot. Do you want to take a break before we start?
No, I want to be sure that we get Ralph in because we bumped him last time.
Okay.
And Brian and Kelly, we'll see. Okay, sure. Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased, I'm gonna stand. My legs need to move, but, pleased to present the first quarter financial statements for the year, the 3 months ending, December 31, 2023. We are 25% of the year complete at that point. Yeah. Oops. There we go. Looking at revenues, for the general fund, water and sewer fund, hotel motel fund, and drainage fund. Again, 25% of the year complete. The general fund is at 28.55% of budget. Water and sewer fund at 23.95%. Hotel motel at 26%, and drainage fund a little over 25%. With the general fund being over the 25%, a lot of that has to do with property taxes that are collected at the beginning of the year. They're levied on October 1, become delinquent on January 31, and a lot of them are paid the first 3 months of the year. So that's a part of that being over the 25%. And with water and sewer fund, again, as you know, a lot of the consumption and flow occurs in the summer months. So that's in line with where we think we need to be in budget. And hotel, motel, drainage fund are just right on target. Just again, to remind you, general fund, just a composition of the revenues. Now over 33% of it is based on sales tax for the budget. Ad valorem taxes are about 20%, solid waste, a little over 16%. So those three revenues make up, I believe I added it up, it was right at 70% of the total revenues of the budget. I just wanted to highlight sales tax, since it is the largest source of revenue for the general fund, and I'm actually moving on 1 more month through January 31. You can see City of Temple on the far left, City of Waco on the far right, and then compared to cities in the state of Texas, where Temple is. And that has to do with our most recent January allocation had an audit adjustment of over close to $1.5 million. And City of
For a single
single-
entity?
I don't know about it.
I saw that in the paper, that,
Yeah.
like 33%.
It's a very large one. We can look, we can get general information, and then the specific information about the one, who it is or what it relates to, is confidential. But that is a very large audit adjustment. What was interesting too is the City of Waco had a negative $500,000 adjustment. So that is why our sales tax is setting that high. And I wanted to, again, we don't know if part of that big adjustment will be a recurring revenue in the future or not. There's things we need to find out, but I wanted to show what it looked like without the adjustment.
Yeah.
Waco's is not as negative, and City of Temple moves over. So out of the first 4 months of the year comparing to last year, our sales tax is not growing in the double digit rates.
But without that adjustment, Temple was still negative?
Without, if we wouldn't have received that 1 point, and actually it's 1.431 million, or 1,431,000, and it could be a combination. We have every month that it's not some plus, some minus, but it's never, or this is not it doesn't occur often when it's this large.
Sure.
So if you take that 1.4 million out and just looked at normal collections, Temple for the first 4 months compared to the prior year would be, a decrease in growth compared to the prior year.
In sales tax growth?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And that would have been back from last year that they
Compared to
found,
last year.
but the money they found that would have been paid last year if it had been paid at the right time.
It could have been. And I know on some of them, on another large one in the past, it was like 4 years of someone not taxing something they should have taxed. So this could be on a single use.
But most of that probably wouldn't have been here if they'd have been paying it right all along. Maybe a little bit of it, but.
Right.
A little bit as each taxing period hit.
So again, we look at budget, our sales tax, we always, because of the volatility and that was the major revenue source of the general fund, we still get the 1.5 million, but we can adjust if we need to adjust our numbers down in the future for growth.
Which we probably will, because there's no reason to think that that's going to be a traditional 1.5 million coming
Right,
in.
yes, we don't think that, but just looking at this scenario, that our sales tax isn't growing like it did.
Like it was.
And it's, so we get, the way we budget that, we have the opportunity to back off of it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Look, Tracy, I'm a little afraid to ask this question because it may show my ignorance. But do we know that audit adjustment is sales tax or a use tax?
It could be either one.
Okay,
I have no details. And when it's this large, the comptroller's office does give you general information about it. Of course, we have those confidential reporting that we can later dig into the details.
We'll never know whether it's use or sales.
We have that access, but it's not public information.
Okay.
But I can give you more detail when we find out, but we don't know it. And we've attempted to contact the comptroller's office.
but we would probably, again, my ignorance, I'm sorry, I'm guessing. If, I know that we want maximum revenue on both at all times, period, right? But if, would we rather it be, it seems like we would rather it be on the use side than the sales tax side. Is that the correct statement?
I'd rather that be on the other side, so it's recurring. You're picking up
Yeah.
something that you do.
Yeah, I see that. I was thinking about a
And then
slowdown.
it will be, you will get it in the future, but it won't be as like.
Yeah, understood. It'll be spread out. Because it could be 4 years or 5 years of something.
People would
Yeah.
still be buying if it was sales
Right.
tax.
And in some cities, like in the Metroplex area, they have audits done that it could be going to the wrong city.
Right.
But I think Waco having the negative as big negative and us having the big positive, did it have any relationship?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Graphic package.
Property tax collections, they're right in line where they've been in the past, as far as what's collected through 12/31. Expenditures, general fund, were slightly over 25%, but again, that relates to capital expenditures. Water and sewer fund, we're below 25%. Again, our more cost to treat water, et cetera, is in the summer, future months, summertime. Hotel motel fund is below right about 18%. I think that has something to do with some events and cost of goods sold. And then we're at drainage fund, we're slightly below, or 23.86% in line where we should be. Investments, we have a little over $401 million invested. 85% of that's in government pools, a little over 11% in CDs, and then we have 2.71% in cash. This is our yield. I think y'all know rates were low, went up, went down, went way up, and now they're starting to drop a little bit. Our portfolio a year ago was earning 3.88%. Today it's earning 5.33%. And we're above our 90-day yield benchmark.
And 2 years ago, it was near zero.
Yes. For a long time.
Yeah, for 2 years.
Flat, flat, flat.
Right. Oops. Capital improvement program. I look back, we were at around 587 million in total projects at the end of September. Of course, a lot of those were completed, rolled off the books. As of 12/31, you still had over $500 million worth of projects scheduled, underway, or in the planning phases. Reinvestment zone right now, this is based on funding source. $517.2 million worth of projects. 35% of that's funded by the reinvestment zone. And then we had the 27% by COs and over 25% water and our utility revenue bonds. And we have grants and other sources. This looks at, again, what's under construction are in progress. Over half of those projects, based on dollars, are under construction or in progress. 22% engineering, 12% of them complete, and 10% just in the planning phase. Wrapping up, I look at the strategic investment zone program status. From the inception of the program, there's been close to $2.4 million allocated. To date, either encumbered, expended, or committed is a little over 1.9 million, leaving a balance of $465,534. And as of 2/15, we had no pending applications. Part of that money is, I think it's close to half and half. Some of it's reinvestment zone funded and some of it's general fund funded. So that concludes first quarter. You have to answer any questions.
Where does the RZ fund the CIS grants? Downtown?
They
All over?
They add funding to the CIS grant program.
Okay,
And
so it's not a
under the
specific
same
area,
rules.
It is, this areas are defined
but it's more than downtown.
a little bit,
Okay.
mostly.
Karen, what did you say?
Strategic investment zone.
No, I know that, but Tim asked where you responded.
We have two zones. We have a downtown and a commercial.
That the RZ is adding into.
I believe.
We have the CIS program that covers the zones we talked about.
Right,
And it's funded, the general fund adds money each year.
right.
The reinvestment zone adds money to that same program.
Oh, the
right there.
general pool. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Their program's not separate.
Yeah.
But
They don't define.
yeah, they do
At all.
offer, they have offered some other similar grants outside of, like the H3.
Yeah.
H5 is on your agenda tonight.
It's fine.
It's not that.
I got it backwards. That was outside of that fund.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I know.
You're right.
Very good. Council, any questions for Tracy? You work on that sales tax. On you.
No, it's all.
That's right. Stop buying engagement. You get thank you, Tracy. Yeah, exactly.
Mayor,
Ralph?
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Also,
You
this
got
is, I do, and thanks, I hope you didn't rush, this is not very exciting, but I don't want to take a whole lot out of your time. We talked about the fleet services division, that's guys work behind the scenes. Where is this? Here? Okay. This is what our division looks like. We have about a total of 24 employees, of which approximately 15 are wrench turners. We have some supporting staff in the inventory room or parts room. Currently, we have 3 vacancies in the heavy duty side. Those positions are traditionally they're a little bit hard to fill. We require some ASC certifications. We're working pretty hard right now to fill those positions. Citywide, we look over and look after about 894 assets. We put 15 new assets into service during the last 3 months of the year, our first quarter. Nationwide, about 10, 11 years for fleet age. Our fleet is 9.2 years old, which it's pretty good considering, how much turnover we have, and we manage about $51 million worth of assets. As I said earlier, this is about 14 of these assets that we put into service in the first quarter. Those range from a couple of Harley Davidsons to jet truck and dump trucks. Yep.
Are those replacements or additions to the fleet?
These were mostly replacements, these first, except for I'm sorry, Chief, those 2 Harleys were replacements, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That's pretty nice. We, in keeping with our high performing organization initiatives, we like to keep our technicians at the forefront here. Considering all the work that we get done, we were still able to clock almost 170 hours of continuing education for our technicians. We set aside some space in our shop where they can go in there without all the noise and work on some of these courses, and that's been working out really well. We're on the 2nd year of our partnership with TISD, with their technical education program. This year we have approximately 3 to 4 students that we see twice a year. We're looking to expand that program, and we've been contacted by Belton, who would like to who's snooping around trying to get their kids into our shop. I mean, we offer really unique experience for them, both in Belton and in Temple. They get automotive technology, but they don't get a chance to see heavy duty diesels and some of the equipment that's used to support those vehicles, like our crimping tools and our hydraulic hoses. And they're not exposed to all that. So we offer them a really unique and special opportunity to get up on those things, and seems to be working out.
So are the Belton kids coming?
We don't know yet. What happened was Miss Denise Ayers, who was in charge of the program, she went over to Belton. So
yeah, we all know that.
Yeah, so,
certain amount of tension there.
Yeah. So that's where we are.
But it's a great program, and if we can expand and not limit our kids, it would be good to do.
No, we won't be limiting our kids, but we won't do that. And that's what we're if we can balance that with
Half of them are Temple kids. Half the Belton ISD kids are Temple kids.
I know.
We could check the past.
The continuing fight that Mike and I have.
Yeah. So next 6 months, mostly business as usual. Of course, we'll be doing all the meetings to start getting our orders in and getting all our fleet stuff. We'll be meeting with Sherry and your team and all the different departments. This CalLAM program that we're doing is kind of taking a little longer than I thought. Kelly, I'm sorry about that, but we're looking. That's a collaborative between IT and fleet. We're getting those units put on our vehicles, and those it is what it is. A GPS system allows us to track our fleet, and it's a lot of fun to look at. If you don't have a dashboard, come look at mine. You can see who's who our speeders are. Some of
Do
them
you
are
have
just
cameras
real-
inside and out?
What's it?
Do you have cameras in the cab?
Actually, we don't. Something we're looking at doing with our heavier equipment.
Yeah.
This CDL training is, slated for the rest of the year actually, and we're pretty current on that right now. And I believe that's it, unless you have any questions.
Hey, Ralph, how are you guys on CDL drivers?
On CDL drivers, we're struggling a little bit. But all the folks that need CDL drivers to do their job have them. It's the other folks that we need to get their CDL drivers so they can advance within their career field. And that's where it's time consuming, and especially in the shop where we're down 3 technicians. It's hard to take more technicians out to get them behind the wheel and doing this training. So, but we're looking at alternatives for them.
This is the party last year in the recycle center before.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
before we ready to.
Yeah, before,
That looks like Tiny Judy there in red.
yes, it does.
Where?
All right.
Lady in red.
In a dress.
Actually, I don't think it is.
There's a little boy in shorts.
Oh, it's not Jenny.
That's a little boy in red.
Yeah, I do though.
You know, if one of y'all tell her that, I'm coming for you.
Or him.
It's true.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
Good job.
It's 20 till. You want to go? Yeah. Good. If you can do it in 40 minutes.
Kelly, if you can do it in 10, I can do mine.
Done.
Don't y'all have a Gettysburg Address?
Kelly,
I think y'all should have a competition to see who's shortest presentation.
Didn't you just go, I think everybody's went for the last time you've gone.
Right, the ball.
They're going fast.
That way.
All right, so here's my org chart. I only have one vacancy.
That's super.
Yeah, that's great. Construction project that we're working on, it's the same projects everybody else is working on, but our status is a little different than everyone else. We're still working on 4th Street. We need to tie in the fiber, and we're having troubles getting the cameras mounted outside since there's no street to put a vehicle on. Animal shelter, we're still working at the gate access service center. We're just ordering equipment. I think that's the consent agenda item this week for y'all to approve. And parks maintenance, we still have some fiber and wireless setup to do. And then at solid waste, Don and Justin want a keypad on the entry door that's not a standard thing that we're getting pricing on. In design, y'all are familiar with these projects. Make sure you're all doing that, and we're completed at FBO and First Street. Cameras, constantly adding cameras and door access. So we have new cameras at Silver, which is complete. By instruction, 3rd floor library where marketing moved, and some of Natalie's staff. The Wildcat, we decided that we needed a different kind of camera, so that's on order. Parks maintenance, railroad, and Walker, and then door access, we've completed at Human Resources, Fire 2 and 4. Working on the closet up here, our network closet, and solid waste, not quite done there yet either. Replacement cameras, this is just 7-year replacement cycles that we replace these cameras. Other facility modifications that we're working on at the EOC, we're working on an audio upgrade, audio video for Chief's conference room and community room, audio for court of record, and then our network closets. We're going to clean them up, reconfigure them, and put some door access on them. And then MBEX is what Jana uses to display the agenda out front. We're going to add an additional TV. And then what we completed is the video at the EOC, Move Marketing, and Move GIS. New technology that we're working on, parking software. Buford talks about that to you guys all the time, so I don't need to get into that. Heather, I think y'all are familiar with her 311 call center. Silverfort, which is an IT software that we'll use for some CJIS requirements. Beyond Trust, it's password safe and privilege management, which basically means instead of an administrator have to log into your computer and install things, we can allow your login to install certain things so we don't have to touch the computers. A kiosk to sign up for council if you want to do public comments. We're working on that. Horizon II, which is penetration testing for our network. Portable cameras for fire, and then countywide fire alerting system. Future projects is intercom system at the library, Hyperwall for PD and fire, and then a couple different software packages for HR. And we completed decisions and moved our IVR to the cloud.
What's the Hyperwall?
A Hyperwall is it's going to be a huge wall that has multiple different feeds. So they can have like the weather channel on one, they can have multiple different feeds, and they can configure how they want it.
Gotcha.
And it's a little long time. She's probably gonna kick me here. He's been waiting for a while. Replacements that we're doing, Niche replaces our current records management. Invoice Cloud just went live Monday, is our new payment processor for utilities. Unilink, Heather's working on now for utility billing. Automox is our new patch management software. Rubicon, Justin's working on, it's for pickups, solid waste pickups. AwardCo, HR is working on for a new awards program. We're looking for new help desk software, new finance software, document/contract management software. Our depository expires in August, so Stacy's working on that. We have a high availability firewall that we're going to install City Hall and PD. And then our standard replacement of MD2 desktops and laptops. We upgraded some software. Completed those replacements. First due is for fire RMS. The SROs that we have in the schools, they had like super old computers. I think they're like 10 years old. We replaced those this year, working with the schools. We replaced our door and video software, so everybody can have one software to see all video instead of multiple different tools. And then our Cradlepoint upgrade. Policies, I'm working with HR now to implement our artificial intelligence policy and our mobile device policy. We're still working on security training standards, technology purchasing and trusted policy. New standards that we're working on, multi-factor, it should be done this month citywide. IT space standards, we got that to Belinda and she's been using that for all of our new construction projects. Next is MFA for Dayforce.
Wait, what's MFA?
Multi-factor. It's when you log into something,
Oh.
you have a second code. Conference room standards. I think I've talked about that till I'm blue in the face. We want to make all rooms work the same. Spare inventory and approved technology list so that people can buy common items without coming through IT. Microsoft licenses for all employees except non-seasonal. And then addressing and street naming standards and CAD checklists for GIS.
Can I ask you a quick question on the Dayforce MFA? Is that because we've had some problems with people trying to change, like, I want to say criminals, chief, people try to attack our payroll data, and we'll go in and get into the system and change the direct deposit location.
It's happened twice.
On individuals. So you do mean.
Yes, they go in that somehow they can hack into the system and have
So
changed.
crazy. It was Emerson, right? A year ago.
Matus.
That's it. Yeah. Like $1 million check. Something crazy.
Yeah, that was real crazy too. And then we had the postman problem too.
Yeah, if anybody asks for your credentials to log in, don't give it to them. It's that easy, but. Yeah. Training is done.
Thank you.
Ongoing projects, our phishing campaigns. We're working with Brian's team on improving MGO. Parks and Rec, we're working with Kevin's team to make some changes to RecTrack or RecConnect, our park software. We're adding some vehicles to cover dead spots that we have throughout the city. And then we're adding multiple additional departments for MGF for permitting, and then continue with our software updates and recycle replacements. GIS, list of projects going on. As y'all know, we struggled at about for the last 6, 8 months. We're finally getting it together and can move forward on projects instead of backwards. So we've got some MO detail that we're adding to our maps. We're working on an RZ map for Tracy. We are rebuilding our Hillcrest and Crossroads applications that we have online for public facing. Lead line analysis, RTR red tape reduction. We added some data to our maps because of some feedback in that meeting. We added a concrete crew to CityWorks and then census data. Completed a few maps, but still have a lot to go. Future projects continue to scan in as-built. We are asking for, in a budget in a couple weeks, we're going to ask for a temporary person to help us do some of the scanning. The current scans that we have, you can barely read. If they are digital, they're terrible scan. They're very shadowy, and so we're going through and rescanning with a higher quality. We do monthly checks on the data that's going into our GIS that's fed from CityWorks from Don's team. We're transferring data from our ESRI or our GIS into our financial system. Map books, we have committed to doing quarterly. TRC map, we're working on the tools so that Nicole can do some of that on her own, so you don't have to wait on us so much. Yeah, it'll be nice. And in the far future, we want to replace our public maps with more of a data hub. So when you go to our public maps today, you see a picture map. We want to provide the data behind what builds those maps so that people can go get their own data. We won't have so many public records requests. And of course, there's not everything we can put out there, but what we can, we'd like to. And then I am asking also in the budget to do an overall review of our GIS group in general. We've had some turnover in employment. We've had a lot of downtime. I just would like somebody to come in that's a professional and tell us, are we doing things the right way? Or could we be more efficient? It's kind of an overall input review of the department. Here's my KPIs, which are super boring. And it's terrible that 99.99 looks so bad.
Change your scales up someday.
I know.
It is bad when you have, no.
Rounds up. Yeah. Our 911 accuracy, we missed a month, and again, that has to do with the issues that we're having. And then our security, last year we implemented some new software that it's awesome. It does a lot of stuff for us so that we don't have to do anything manually. It stops emails from getting through. It stops attachments from getting through. It determines or identifies things that are suspicious and puts them in an inbox, and we can review them and release them if they're okay or not. And if multiple people get that same email, it pulls out all their inboxes. So it's a very valuable tool, but here's some numbers on what it's doing for us. And then devices that we support.
I have a couple. On the Crossroads reservation app,
Yes,
is that still limited to City of Temple residents?
when we get it going again, it doesn't stop them. It puts it to a review so parks can decide if they want to sign up or not.
It's not just residents, they can also.
People that own property owners, I guess, taxpayer. Okay. And then, Tracy, this might be a question for you too. How's the new water department building process going? I mean, I know it's only been live a day or two, but.
So we just implemented the payment part of it
Right.
on Monday, and it's been going well.
We've had a few comments and one or two complaints that come across my desk.
Okay.
But Heather's addressed them, and they were very excited about rolling it out. So
And the reason why I got one email from one guy, and this is his personality. He said, try the new billing system, doesn't work. So.
I know
you I
that
don't-
user error. One
Yeah,
of
probably. That's
the, one of the
probably
things that Heather was working on this morning, we kind of had a meeting this morning to talk about some of the issues is when they sign up, they get an email, and in the link with that for them to go to set up auto pay or whatever they want to set up, the link was wrong. And so it was taking them to a a bad link, it was a bad page. So we've since taken it off, so that's fixed and that could be part of it.
Taking it off, meaning you fix the link or that you remove that capability to go to, I mean,
We fixed the link
Yeah.
that they're getting. So
Yeah.
to right.
Okay, good. I told him I fixed it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But it does provide a lot more options than what we had before. So they had a Venmo, I don't want to call it an issue, but a delay in payment from a Venmo, which we've never allowed before.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different opportunities for payment. So. Yep.
Very nice. Now, isn't it supposed to, it's supposed to roll over your old username and password is supposed to roll into the new system, is that correct? Or do you have to reset that up?
You have to reset all your stuff up.
Got it?
If it's a bank draft, you don't have to reset it, but if it's credits, what you do.
And that was one of the complaints that I read. Mayor,
You had to reset the password.
you had to put that info back in.
Oh.
For your credit card stuff.
Okay.
I could have Heather come do a presentation on that, and just the status and how it's going. If you like.
I think that would be helpful if the rest of the council's interested.
Be interesting.
I think it would also be beneficial because if this goes as well as we had planned, we're gonna apply it to more than just utility billing.
Yeah. Nice.
So either, I'll get with Bria and Aaron, David, we'll, either do it during our budget discussions
Okay.
or at a work session very soon.
Okay. Yeah, because we do, you know how it goes, right? In many ways, we're the council's a customer facing to the try it doesn't work and that's all you get. So it'd be nice for us to feel more up to speed on it, I think.
I'm sure Heather would be more than happy
Yes.
to give him a call. If he wants help, if he doesn't really want it, I don't know. Sometimes you don't know.
Yeah.
People just like
Is there like a 2-month grace period on late fees?
Asking for a friend.
I'll ask Heather, you got that.
I don't want a call from Heather.
Okay, the email was, no, he sent it.
I think you would have at 10, not for all the questions.
Yeah, I would have made it.
All right. I don't know if I can talk as fast as you, but so going to try to do this in 10 minutes. But one, just point
Oh,
out some
beautiful.
of these are Mr. Deckman's
Beautiful.
Nice.
photos, and he's let us use them free of charge. Thank you, Jason. And so just want to start with permits and inspections, updates. And CJ Directy, those of you who haven't met him, he moved here from Colorado in May. CJ and Tammy Barton, our relatively new permit supervisor, doing a fantastic job of updating documents, working on red tape reduction, developing an SOP manual for our permit technicians. Also, MGO, our permitting software, of course, been working very closely with IT. And anyway, CJ has also hired 2 key new members of our staff. Our inspection staff is now complete with David Watson, who I believe lives in Belton, but had been commuting to Leander or Cedar Park. So much better commute. He's got, I think, all the certifications we need, or most of them, which is a great thing. Tiffany Harrison, our newest permit technician, who is also a retired military, Army. Her husband is still in the Army, but either way, brings fantastic experience and customer service skills. And then also just CJ's team updating the different documents for public outreach on the web, but also just for handouts. And looking at other accomplishments in the planning and zoning side, but also community vitality. This is an exciting one. It's not a huge project, but it's always fun to see some of these grant-funded projects come to fruition. East Central Sidewalks, so connecting all the way to BJ's Brewery from MLK, both sides of the street. Some of you may have seen that. Also interesting because Curly's Meat Market was recently featured in the newspaper just about their expanded business model. And so Don could he's downtown, he can just walk down there and pick up a couple sandwiches. Also, I'll go through these quickly. I have some visuals on a few of them, including Boker's Edition, voluntary annexation, FM 93 and Highway 95. Use of ITE digital data for land use traffic analysis. We went over some of that. Example today with the Nugent project, historic resource survey under Kelly's leadership. That RFP has been issued, is now closed, and we had 3 responses, I think, from good firms. We hired our newest planner, Shelby Smith. So welcome, Shelby. And for the record, I know I'm wearing burnt orange, but I think she is our 4th straight Aggie planner that I've hired. So I don't know what's going on with that. The Aggie pipeline is strong right now. That's great because we've got good planners here. And then also just continue to work on the red tape reduction. So the Boker's Edition, of course, this is the example, and that's 145 acres of private development, 350 homes, retail and multifamily across the electrical easement, and then, of course, a new TISD elementary school at the heart of it. Also, the ITE subscription that I mentioned, I actually want to thank Public Works and especially Richard Wilson. I believe, well, for one, y'all are paying for this, which is great, but it's a fantastic tool where we can take the uses that are proposed, plug it in with square footage, numbers, such as for warehouse office, plug in the square footage and other factors, and it'll actually generate specific data from 71, in this case, 71 different projects from around the country. And so you can see that the straight line is the average, and then the X's indicate actual data points. So it's a huge benefit in terms of traffic impact analysis. And I say that not formal traffic impact analysis, but to be able to give you all a little bit more detailed analysis of what a project might generate.
Are those local data points?
No, these are national, and that's why you do see a decent amount of variation on both sides of the straight line. And just some other quick projects. These are not big ones, but these are, sometimes the little ones make a big difference in the community. And I want to give some kudos to Omega. So, on Adams, we've got projects on both sides, new sidewalks generated by those projects. Well, Omega recognized that then they had a hole in the sidewalk system, and they didn't want to be that hole. And so they filled in that sidewalk on their own. It wasn't a requirement. So excited to see that. Other things downtown. So we've got some new businesses, design and consign on Main Street. But this is just an example that our downtown code allows for a mural instead of just traditional signage, and they've used that option. And so I think this one looks good, but either way, if you don't like it, well, it can be painted over.
Very pretty.
Yes. And the new Extraco Bank building, this is a good example, I think, of the central area standards, what they look like when new construction happens. Central fits in really well with that block. And of course, they declined to build it right up against Trano and block their beautiful mural. And instead, they're actually including a courtyard, a public area, which you don't see in a lot of small banks. So that's a great thing that they have chosen to do, not that we have required. All right, significant plans, next 90, working under CJ's leadership and Kelly Brown's MGO Connect, the transition to the upgraded system with our current software, which will include quite a bit of automation. And so we're looking at April 1st for that rollout. Architectural salvage program, really Kelly's idea that that also requires a lot of coordination with Public Works and Transform Temple. That's taking architectural elements from demolitions and being able to salvage them and provide, and hold them actually in, I guess, the yard over by the recycling center. At the early stages of, it was a good idea that is now coming to fruition.
So that will be salvaging architectural things
Right.
that the city will then own and we can utilize or sell.
Selling is a little more complicated,
Yeah.
but I think the details are still being worked out, but it's a matter of, hey, there are windows, for example,
Sure.
that could be reused, that someone may want to incorporate into their project in the historic district or what have you. And so it's exciting. Community
Yeah.
Treasures contest, the photography and also a painting competition hosted by Main Street. Kelly and her team have taken that on, and the departure of our Main Street manager. UDC update, we talked about that. Certificate of occupancy process. We're just at the initial stages of working with various departments to establish that beyond just a final building inspection for a permit for a new building. Well, a change of use, like other cities, pretty much every other city I'm aware of, at least the ones I've worked in, have a CO process to be able to address uses as before they come in to see, is that allowed? It generates a fire inspection, make sure it's safe. So looking at that, starting that process now, the neighborhood planning, district zoning overlays, and I guess we hadn't told Mark White that we actually are working on pre-approved or approved building plans for infill. So under Aaron's leadership, that's a really exciting element to the overlays, the historic resource survey, and then also adding Spanish to the permits website and translating some of the neighborhood planning documents.
To Spanish.
Spanish, yep. And so just real quick, in salvage program, for example, the first donation has been received by Derek Morris of Happy Karma Home, 32 different windows. We also, I think Kelly picked some up in her car that had been discarded and were in brush and bulk pickup that I walked by and said, hey, these windows look pretty good. Kelly, do you want them? She drove by and picked them up. So, and then also the Community Treasures photo and painting contest. Kudos to Kelly and her staff for continuing this, because I think it's been very successful as part of Preservation Month in May. So the deadline for the next round is April 5th. This is the most recent painting winner, a student, I forget her name, but she did an awesome job with the historic post office. And then Kelly came in second in the photo. So nice job, Kelly, on the Jupi silos. All right, we already talked about the UDC a lot. We don't need to talk about any more. Permits, just quick updates, looking at our KPI related to them, specifically looking at the whole volume of permits. And of course, looking at quarters 2 through 4, we'll fill those out during the year. So let's just zoom into quarter 1. And on the bottom, you can see 2024, that we had 1,378 all permits, which is significantly less than last year. But last year, despite having a lower number of housing starts or new residential permits, the other permits were all increased. So we actually had a record number of total permits, even though housing starts were much lower. But this quarter was comparable to 22 and 21, which you can see in gray and yellow there.
It's like solar panels and all that.
Yeah, you name it. And lots of remodels that, maybe folks that were planned on moving, buy a new house in the community, decided, hey, my house looks pretty good right now. Just need to fix it up. Looking at the residential starts specifically, you can see that this is a good thing. The blue for this past quarter, 59% higher than the same quarter last year. So I think we're getting back to those high volumes despite interest rates still being pretty high. So that is a really good sign. Looking at all inspections, once again, that's last year because of permit volumes being so high. Inspections, of course, were very high, but we're comparable, a little bit lower this year, but still higher than in 22 and 21. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's Jason.
Yeah.
It's the photocrat on the bottom.
Very good, Jason.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's good info.
All right, thank you.
Kelly, what'd you do? Stand down in the middle of those silos underneath and shoot up like that? What camera?
iPhone.
No, she was part of that.
Okay, that's right. We can call Mr. White up right quick. We have 10 minutes left. You want to call him back? The UDC guy? No? Okay, just trying to use everybody's time. They can take this. All right, very good. I'll draw this meeting to a close. It is 4:47. See everybody downstairs.